housing that was been brought up a few times, and so I thought this would be good. I invited Kim Fitzgerald and Jim Levinsky from to come and give a talk. Kim from Cathedral Square and Jim from Lamoille Housing Partnership. So, I figure go through some information around where we are for housing, and then open it up to some discussion, and we'll just go from there. So thank you for being here today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having us, Representative Noyes. Appreciate the opportunity. I recognize most on the call, so some of this information might be a little tutorial, I guess, on some regards, but I know for a lot of the newer legislators, we really wanted to kind of get to some of the basics about housing, and there's definitely some others on the call that would even have greater expertise, so we can always defer to them as need be. But I am going to go ahead and share my screen and do a few PowerPoint slides. So please, because I won't be able to see everybody, if during that time you have any questions, just put it in the chat. I should be able to see the chat, and then I can answer them going through. I only have a few slides, so it's not going to be a large amount, or we can wait until the end. And then I can turn it over to Jim to kind of complement my my presentation more on he'll get more into particulars about development kind of woes than I guess I probably would. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully then you'll be able to all see. Yes. Okay, everybody can see?
Great, yes.
Great. So again, just for those who may be joining, I'm Kim Fitzgerald. I'm the CEO from Cathedral Square. And we have a little bit, I want to give a little bit of background about Cathedral Square so that you know my kind of experience. So we own, manage, and develop affordable housing, including 2 licensed assisted living facilities. These are, you can see here, are kind of our portfolio of properties. But we also, in addition to the 2 assisted living communities, we have a property here that is for those who are formerly homeless, and we work in partnership with A New Place. We have a property here that is for those who have mental health concerns, and it's a partnership with Howard Center. You have to be a client of Howard Center. We also have a property that is for folks who are continuing their education but have a dependent child. And then we also have a community that's actually intended for folks under the age of 62 who need intense personal care services that actually home health and hospice provides those services too. So we have some kind of unique housing opportunities, but in general, all of the others, so the other 20 plus communities, are really for 55 and older, or 62 and or disabled. So this is really kind of the area of our expertise, and Cathedral Square has been in existence for over 40 years. We have at these locations over 1,000 homes. We call them homes or apartments, and we serve over 1,300 people of all ages in Chittenden and Franklin County, and soon hopefully to be Grand Isle County, because we are working on a property up in the islands. We are also the statewide administrators of SASH, serving about 4,500 people across the state. I have worked personally in affordable housing for almost 30 years now. It's kind of remarkable to think about that. I've been at Cathedral Square. This is my 22nd year at Cathedral Square. And prior to that, I was 7 years at Vermont Housing Finance Agency. So today, what I was really hoping to cover is, what affordable housing really means, what information is out there, kind of about affordable housing, and what hurdles we face in building affordable housing. So I'm going to today talk about rental housing and the 3 different types of independent rental housing. Now, we all know that for older Vermonters, they have many other options as well. I mean, they could own, they could live with family, they may even be able to add an accessory dwelling unit, or if they need care, more intensive care, they might be able to live at a residential care facility, assisted living, or nursing home. So those could all be future conversations. There's also home share as an option. There's the villages model that helps with services. There's obviously choices for care. So there's a lot in that regard. But today I'm really solely focusing on just independent housing. And so there are three categories of housing fall into the places of market, tax credit, and subsidized. So for market, that really gets into any of us could live in a market rate housing. There are no income restrictions. And the owner can charge whatever rent they want for a market rate apartment. For a tax credit apartment, you need to be under a certain income limit to be able to move into the property. And then once you move in, if we all were income eligible to be in tax credit unit, we would, if they're all similar size, we'd probably pay about the same amount when we moved in. It's not based on income. But the subsidized, which you may hear, and you can hear this in many different ways, it can be Section 8, it can be rental assistance, it can be subsidized, HUD 202, RD funding, portable vouchers, project-based subsidy, all of those things talk about a subsidized unit. And when you have that, when you're trying to apply for that, you have to be in an even lower income level bracket to move in. But then once you move in, you pay 30% of your income in rent. And so if all of us were income eligible for a subsidized unit, once we moved in, we'd all be paying different rents. Somebody might be paying $200, another person might be paying $525. I mean, it would be just solely based on your income. So let me give you an example in Burlington. So this is the income limit chart. This is published by the federal government, by HUD, and we use it and adjust it for tax credits and for home units. And I've just shown here the Burlington limits, but it is by county throughout the state of Vermont. Burlington does represent most of Chittenden County and some outlying towns. But just to give an example, I wanted to illustrate how this works. So if you're going to be income eligible for a tax credit unit, and this is very generally speaking, most of our tax credit apartments are at or below the 60% of area median income, all language you don't really need to know about, but means you have to earn under, for one person, $38,520 a year to move into a tax credit unit. Again, if we all moved in and we were under that limit, we'd all pay about the same amount in our equal sized apartments. For a HUD or subsidized unit, you have to earn under $32,100 in the Burlington area. And there is some even deeper targeting for folks at 30% on some of the units. So you'd have to be under $19,250 if for some, but those are a little extra deeper level funding. And so if you were to live in one of these properties, and you can see over here on the right side of the chart, the maximum that you would have to pay for a tax credit unit is $1,000, $1,032. Now I'll give you an example. In Burlington, market rate might be, at least $1,500 for a one bedroom apartment. So by tax credit, you only pay at maximum $1,000. So you can see it's a nice break. It's a huge break from what the market is actually supporting. So in tax credit, it would be $1,000 max. And then, like I said, in the HUD units, it'd be a percentage of your income, with this being the most you'd absolutely pay because of the income brackets that they have. So I know that, so both tax credits and subsidized housing is considered affordable. So when you hear the word affordable, it encompasses both. Yet rents of over $1,000, which is obviously where the limit puts, is not affordable to many people living on fixed incomes, and especially older Vermonters. Because of this, I know that Cathedral Square tries really hard to keep our rents and all of our utilities, all one package included, even lower. So we are about the $900 range for a one bedroom in the Burlington area. Still pretty high, but trying to keep that as low as we possibly can, but still much better than the $1,500 you pay or more if it includes utilities in the Burlington area. So why is all of this important? It's important because Vermont is the second oldest state in the nation. The population cohort between the ages of 66 and 74 is the largest growing segment of the population, and it's continuing to grow. Many Vermonters in that cohort are living on fixed incomes and need subsidized apartments. And if we can't meet the need today, it's only going to get worse, right? Because this is a growing segment. So as I mentioned earlier, Cathedral Square has 1,000 apartments, and we have a wait list of over 1,300 people today. So I say, our organization has been in existence for over 40 years. We could literally build what it's taken us 40 years to build tomorrow and still not meet the needs on our wait list. So a lot of people don't realize when they call for an apartment with us that it can take years to get in. In fact, our average is 3 to 5 years. Most people think it's going to be months, and that's not the case. It's years. It's years to get into our properties. So there's absolutely a shortage of affordable housing across the state. You may see lots of housing going up, and I know, especially if you live in Chittenden County, I know I do, but much of that is market rate housing, and which many older Vermonters, cannot afford. So I want to stop there just to see if there's any questions specific to this. No, okay. So
we do have a hand up.
oh, okay.
Representative Tariano, do you have a?
I did. I'm sorry I came in late.
No worries.
A little late out of committee, but so the $200 million that has just come into the state as a result of the latest CARES money or the COVID relief funds specifies or uses the AMI, the annual median income, as a guide, and it's quite low. However, I do believe that it would qualify seniors living on Social Security alone, primarily, and we're hoping that it will allow us to pay rent forward for the coming months for these folks. But I guess I'm wondering, how does the AMI standard fall into some of these housing situations that you're speaking of? And I'm sorry if I came in late and I didn't catch that or something. But
that's okay. I'll go back to actually, let's see if I can just go back here to the chart. So we do, and Chip, you may already know this, but we do have the area median income, which is that AMI figure, is fully impacts all affordable housing. So in order to move into what I was explaining before, in order to move into tax credit, you have to be at or below the 60% mark, and for HUD, you have to be at or below 30%. But I think you're getting into more of what this funding is currently that's coming in to help with rental assistance for people who are back, on their rents, they're in rent arrearages. That's a program I know that the Vermont State Housing Authority has been working on, and I know has helped many, many Vermonters who have been, just can't afford the rent during COVID for whatever their circumstances may be. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Did that get to it or no?
Yes, I understand that. Our concern was that 50% of AMI was pretty low to help some people that certainly are in situations that are as critical as anyone else's. And we haven't had any movement from Washington as far as making any adjustments on that at this point. So yeah, I was just curious. So I do see what you're saying is 50%, and that is the recommended guideline on the rental assistance. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And just to note here, this is the chart you're seeing here is for Burlington area. So just so you know, there's a many more pages to this document that shows every county in the state of Vermont. So the limits are different by county. So just to pull that out as well.
Yeah,
and
I'm sorry.
thing I will just mention because you brought it up, one of the things, because we are also the providers of 2 long-term care facilities, we know that COVID has really hurt us dramatically because of vacancies. We barely have vacancies at our assisted living facilities typically, pre-COVID, but with COVID, we had 11 vacancies at one time at our 38 apartment assisted living facility. So that's, almost a third of the units actually. It's just huge. So that really hurt us. And it was partly because of COVID, people couldn't move in. We were on lockdown, so we couldn't move people in. And we also had folks who may have come up on the wait list when we had a small window of time that they actually could move in, chose not to. Just because of COVID, and it was the timing of it. So we are really struggling from an income perspective on long-term care. So I do know we've been in conversations with Senator Lyons actually about helping out long-term care from the income perspective. There has been some help last year, not this year at all, but last year with the expense side, but there's really been next to no help on the income side. So a little off tangent there, but as I've said, I can speak about long-term care another day if you want to, but that's an area that we're hoping some of this COVID relief funding could help support as well.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get on to what we call the three legs of the stool, which is what we feel you need to really successfully build and sustain affordable housing in Vermont. So the main source of affordable housing is the 9% tax credits, and that is a federal program run through the IRS. The state gets a Vermont allocation that goes to VHFA that you then must apply, and it's a really competitive process. With the amount of tax credit dollars that come to Vermont, only about 5 projects that get funded a year. The Qualified Application Plan, or QAP, is what sets out the state's eligibility priorities and criteria for awarding those federal tax credit dollars coming into the state. Now, that in Vermont, our QAP does have a cap set by VHFA, and I know Maura's on the call, so she can talk about this, but that only 25% of the total 9% tax credit funding that comes into the state each year can be used for age-specific or senior housing at most. So that is at best about 1 property a year, if, that's at most. There are also 4% housing tax credits, also federal funding source, which is also made through VHFA with their tax exempt financing. And that provides less equity, much less equity than the 9% housing credits. Therefore, it requires more other funding to be able to fill the gaps, such as home funding, CDBG, VHCB funding, and National Home Trust Fund they all need to be added to actually make a project actually work, to be able to build it. VHCB is Vermont Housing Conservation Board is a main and critical state funder of affordable housing. Another source, more similar to the tax credit funding, is the HUD 202 program, which is specific to 62 and older and or disabled housing. And that funding actually hasn't come into Vermont since 2013. I think 2013 was the last time it came to Vermont, which was our Thayer House location. And they just did come out with some funding opportunities. And I know that Rural Edge will be applying on for a HUD 202 application this year. And we obviously hope they're very successful with that, so we can get some more HUD 202 housing in the state. Now, it's true that older Vermonters do not need to live in age-specific housing. They can move into any other affordable housing property that's available. But we know that many older Vermonters want to live with their peers. And we also know that it's easiest and most cost-effective way to bring services, such as SASH, to a whole property. Cathedral Square tailors the designs of our properties to meet this age cohort's needs. So for example, we'll put in 2 elevators when most community developers will only put in 1. They're really expensive and they'll put in 1, but we put in 2 because we know if one of the elevators is being worked on or is down, if you live on that 3rd floor, you need that elevator. It's really important. So we'll put in 2 elevators. We'll also, for example, put in grab bars on both sides of the hallway so that if you have a stroke, doesn't matter what side, you have an option for grab bars as you're walking down the hallway, or even just to stop and catch your breath and be able to move on. We'll also install larger bathrooms for turning radius. These are all just examples. There's a whole bunch of things that we do to be able to provide what's needed for this age cohort. So then, even if you do in fact get tax credits, which you'll see here on the screen, this is our newest property that's fully constructed and occupied. This is our Allard Square apartment, which is named after a resident who lived with us for over 35 years. And this list here shows you all of the funding sources that it took to build this property. So there's 10 here, 10 funding sources. We got the 9% credits. And then we had all of these funding sources to help actually have it be built. And if it had been 4% tax credits, obviously the gap would have been larger and we would have needed more funds from all of these other providers and sources and possibly more. In addition to the capital, so that was again the first leg of the stool, we feel strongly, based on what I was saying earlier, that you need rental assistance or subsidy to make the rents truly affordable for folks. Project-based subsidy or housing vouchers are really critical, especially to support those who are low income and those who are formerly homeless. They really absolutely need that subsidy to make it affordable. We also believe, lastly, the three legs of the stool, we also believe in services to support folks as they're living there. The SASH is a proven population health approach to care coordination and support services, most effectively delivered in congregate housing settings. SASH supports people where they live with individual care planning and programming brought right to the community where they live. SASH has been rigorously evaluated by 5 times now. We've had evaluation 5 different times, and it's been shown to reduce Medicare expenditure as compared to a control group that does not have SASH. That was the only real difference. SASH is statewide, as I mentioned earlier. It's in every single county, but it has been capped for the past 10 years. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and every year it's been capped at how many panels we can roll out. We do, in fact, have wait lists of people waiting to get SASH services. And we know that SASH has been critical to helping people cope through the pandemic by staying connected throughout this time. SASH could be honestly a whole presentation in and of itself, so I will stop there, but that's also something else I know Representative Noyes has had SASH present before, and maybe we can again at some point. So that's about the services. That really represents what we call the 3 legs of the stool. So now to kind of the most important piece is, how can you all as representatives and legislators for us represent this and help this need for affordable housing? So the first thing would be to support the governor's recommendation of the $34.8 million for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, VHCB. As you have seen in my previous example, they are a major source of gap funding to get these properties built. So that would be a huge help. Second is highlight affordability wherever you can, the need for communities to be inclusive and include affordability, whether that's in designations or Act 250 discussions. All of that would be critically important as well. Also support another housing revenue bond. The housing revenue bond, which now I think is almost 3 years ago, really boosted housing production. It was a wonderful resource that got funding right off the ground of apartments built relatively quickly. The downside, and I have to just be honest about this, the downside of that is the debt service payments that Vermont Housing and Conservation have to pay for out of their annual allocation. So that just takes away from how much they're able to support the ongoing properties every year when they have to pay that debt service back. So our request here is that you support another housing revenue bond, but with a dedicated revenue source for those debt payments. And whether that means more funding towards VHCB, that's kind of what we would be getting at there. The other thing to consider, and I know Earhart's on the call, so he may even want to talk further about this, but is consider including very low income seniors. Again, when you look back at that chart of that income brackets, like very low income, to be eligible for the state subsidy program. That would be another thing that would really help, again, trying to get at the subsidy that these residents need. And then lastly, on this list, to just be as concise as possible, is to support the expansion of SASH. As I mentioned, we have wait lists, we've been capped for 10 years, and the continued DALE funding. As a reminder to the group, in just over a year and a half, the $540,000 out of the DALE budget, the legislation has asked to transition to One Care Vermont, and One Care is saying they will not cover that. So that becomes a huge concern for us. We had 3 years to figure this out, and we have yet to figure it out. And we're coming up on kind of the last year. And I meet on a regular basis with AHS and with the Green Mountain Care Board to try to figure this out. But we need that continued funding, or it's going to really have a really detrimental impact on SASH and our programming. So those are really the slides. Like I said, I know a lot of other folks are on the call that would have even more probably details they want to add, but I wanted to be sure to kind of get that basic level of information out there and answer any questions folks have. And if folks don't have any questions at this point, we can move it on to Jim.
Great, thank you, Kim. I really appreciate that. It's a great presentation, thanks. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Okay, thank you. Jim, anything you'd like to add? What's going on with the work you're doing here in Lamoille County?
Sure, thanks. Kim, that was a great overview. Thank you for putting that together. So my name is Jim Levinsky. I'm the Executive Director at Lamoille Housing Partnership. So Kim and I represent 2 housing developers out of 11, I believe, around the state. And she's given you kind of a broad overview. At Lamoille Housing Partnership, we focus in Lamoille County and in Hardwick. And our little outfit owns and operates just about 300 units, serving a little over 400 people in our housing. That includes a 32 lot mobile home park in Hardwick, where we put Vermont high efficiency homes in recently, and are looking at putting 2 more zero energy modular homes in next month. Actually, they should be going in to serve some homeless folks. So because we're talking about seniors, I'd like to focus on that a little bit too. Approximately a third of the folks we serve are seniors. We have several properties that are what are termed senior properties, as Kim talked about. They're 55 and over, or folks with disabilities. Several of them are what are called subsidized, meaning that they have place-based subsidies where the residents only pay 30% of their income for their housing cost, and that's what they're based on. I can't tell you how important those are to the folks who live in those units. They all have huge waiting list, 70 to 100 at any time, and they do, as Kim said, take years for people to get an opening to move into them. Because that's the way they are, they serve very low income folks. If you think about a single senior, a widower perhaps, who is living on one Social Security check, that only may be $1,000 or $1,200 a month of income. It's incredibly difficult. And every year we do surveys about how many homeless people we serve. And we just did the new one for 2020, and I was looking it over, and we're serving previously homeless folks in our subsidized senior housing. And I dare say that if we didn't have that subsidized housing, there would be more seniors who would be homeless that we would be dealing with right now. Our housing for seniors is independent living. We do have SASH, and we offer HOS services, Wheels on Meals, things like that. We also have worked with local, like the Vermont Center for Agriculture and our local schools, to develop community gardens on site, raised garden beds, things like that, so people can actually grow their own food on site and garden and have a nice life where they live, which is really important to us at all times. We also, 47 of our units out of the nearly 300 right now are serving folks who were previously homeless. That's about a little over 17% of our total portfolio. That being said, one of the difficulties that I think we have the most with is finding enough subsidies to get people housed and keep them housed while we try and provide the services they need to get them on their feet so they'll be permanently housed. So we're working together, I think, on the stool, as Kim showed you, to try and make all those things happen together. And we work really hard with our local service providers, Capstone, Agency of Human Services, Mental Health, to provide services for folks where they live in the to really help them get settled and be stable in housing and be successful for the long term. That's really our goal. So that's kind of what I have to say for our little part of the world in housing. We do have a new development that we hope to break ground on very shortly in Morrisville. It's a 24-unit apartment building right downtown in a vacant lot. We've been working on it for several years and really looking forward to get it under construction very shortly. So open it up for questions, I guess.
Great, thanks. Looks like we have a couple. I didn't see whose hand went up first, so I guess I'll start with Representative Page.
Yes, my question has to do with 55 and older that are taking care of perhaps their grandchildren. Are you experiencing any of those issues, and how might you be dealing with them? And maybe both of you could discuss that. Thank you.
I can only think of one case in our portfolio, and it's not in a subsidized housing, it's in a regular tax credit place. Well, although there's another one at the mobile home park, actually, where we have an older couple who adopted a child and is living with that child and doing quite well. One of the phenomenons that we've experienced recently, which was interesting to me in our market study for our newest property, was older gentlemen who have recently been widowed, who have been, as an example, maybe living on a farm where he did the farm work and his wife maybe worked in a school setting, so they had health care, for instance, took care of all the household stuff, and she passed away, and now he's had to leave the farm and trying to figure out what he's going to do on one income and learn how to do all the things that she did to help take care of him for his whole life. I found that just an incredibly interesting story that seems to be happening over and over again. So maybe Kim has something to offer.
I would just say that, we strongly support kinship care. It's really important that it's happening more and more in Vermont, but across the nation as well, that grandparents are taking care of their grandchildren. And so there are some funding restrictions, but wherever we can, we allow it.
All right, thank you. Chip, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Good to see you. I was really happy to see that we got those two new energy efficient units in Evergreen Manor, and anyone lives nearby Hardwick, it's worth a visit to Evergreen Manor. It's just a phenomenal park, which turned a lot of really dilapidated mobile homes into these wonderful energy self-sufficient units to house low-income folks. And I did want to make another plug for the $200 million that just came into the state for rental arrears and, again, hopefully rent forward. And Jim, those are the folks that you were talking about. Single people living on one Social Security check, 50% of AMI are eligible, and we are trying to make them eligible for rent forward. So we hopefully could be able to pay up to 6 months in advance for rental and free up some of the income that or the limited income that they do have to use for other purposes. So where the money's not out in the community yet, but it should be soon.
That'd be great. We always welcome your support.
We had a meeting here with the Lamoille County legislators, and one thing I thought was interesting that Lamoille Housing Partnership brought up was that of the 365 applications they got, 1/3 were from individuals over the age of over the age of 62. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and actually that brings up a point. Last year we had over 360 applications and only 70 openings that we could fill. which leaves a lot of people out. And all of our senior properties, at any given time, there's 70 to 100 people on a waiting list.
Do you track how many towns? Do you track how many towns are putting the need for housing for older Vermonters in their town plans? Because I think when it comes up where you're looking to get permits, you know, if it's in the town plan, it can make things a little smoother. I know Wolcott has that. Do you track if other towns are putting that in there?
I don't personally. I'm not sure if Maura or Jen might know an answer like that.
Hi, I'm Maura Collins with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and we don't have a database of that, but I can tell you, having read scores of them, I see senior housing called out more than I see any other type. Affordable housing has to be called out, and then it is like a format where they just go right from affordable housing to senior housing as by default, and that's called out more than other demographics or type of housing and all that. So I can't go on the record and say it's the majority, but if we were, you know, unofficial, I would bet on it that most of them look at that especially.
Great. Woody, I see you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, I have another question.
Sure.
Do all these housing groups, do you all coordinate with one another? Say if you have a citizen in one town that you cannot accommodate, do you perhaps try to transfer that individual into another community or another town or another housing project? So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I'll just give a most recent example. Yeah, I mean, I think we do. We have a pretty strong network, and VHCB definitely supports us and all coming together on a regular basis. And I'll give an example. We're opening a relatively new we're opening a new property, and we have an applicant from another nonprofit in the state, and trying to get that applicant to move. So I reached right out to them to say, you know, is there any way we could get them a portable voucher to be able to move? And so, yes, we do. And that circumstance was that they're 80 years old and wanting to live across the street from, you know, from their daughter, who really is their sole care provider right now. So it really does make a lot of sense for them to move. So we're, you know, we try to work together as much as we can and whatever the regulations require us to do. But yes, as much as we possibly can. That's my perspective. I don't know if Jen Holler would like to say any different from VHB perspective.
And Jim, I guess, Mr. Levinsky.
Yeah, we do often, and especially for LHP with home ownership, because we don't have a home ownership center, but for instance, Down Street does. So we coordinate with them quite often for when we get people who are wanting to get into a home and access the services that are available to support people with, you know, first-time home ownership.
Great, thanks. Well, all right. Yeah.
Can I jump in again? Maura here from VHFA. I just, I don't want to say much. I want to overwhelm you with resources that you all can take home and fall asleep to at night. That's VHFA's specialty. We overdo it on our data, and I wanted to make sure that you all knew that we have a ton of town level data available if you wanted to look into any of this. So I just put it in the chat. We have a housing data website where you can pull up every town. And I know this may be important to some of you. You could select 3 or 4 contiguous towns that may match up with your district. And you could look at things like the number of people by age, which may be of interest to you, or the housing gaps by income, and if they're owners or renters, and by age. There's just a wealth of information about the demographics, looking at housing costs as well as housing stock, the supply and the demographics. There also last year was a housing needs assessment that VHFA did for the state. It was released right before the pandemic, so it got no airplay whatsoever. But there was a special seniors section of that. That's the second to last link I just sent you. You may want to see statewide, overall, how are our seniors doing when it comes to their housing needs. And finally, a couple of years ago now, VHFA dug into this topic specifically and looked at seniors and how they're served in affordable housing specifically. So that's also the last link I shared. So that's for you all to digest on your leisure. And I guess finally, since I don't know everyone here, I'm going to put my email address in the chat in case people had questions about some of this data or where it came from, or if you want to have, healthy discussions about what you read.
Thank you so much. We'll also include that in the minutes that I send out every week. So appreciate that. I grabbed a copy of that, put it in our minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to listen in. I completely agree with Jim that Kim did a tremendous job at staying high level, but also being just spot on with all the details. It was a masterful stroke, Kim, to get in so quickly, and Jim to bring another example of how this plays out in the state. There's so many wonderfully positive examples of how we're serving seniors in Vermont through affordable housing, through the natural partnerships of the community programs you see here, but also VHCB that with Jen Holler here, and VHFA and the state and the housing authorities. We really all do work very closely together and are happy. I'm sure I can speak on all of us and say happy to answer more questions about this.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we've been having some pretty good turnouts at the older Vermonters Caucus, but a lot of competition today. So we got some blue sky out there, and there's some child development day here. So, all right. So does anybody else have anything they'd like to bring up, or any questions or anything?
Representative Noyes?
Yeah, Jen.
Hello, everyone. My name's Jen Holler. I'm the Policy Director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and I want to start with a thank you, and that is that the legislature trusted VHCB to use about $35 million in coronavirus relief funds last year, specifically targeted to creating permanent housing for homeless. As you've already heard, unfortunately, a greater percentage of those who are experiencing homelessness are seniors, so that's a really distressing trend. But we're grateful for that support of the legislature and hope that you're pleased with the results. A couple other ways that the state is already directing housing resources through VHCB that help seniors. I just wanted to remind you to think about, and that is that through VHCB we fund a lot of home accessibility improvements, helping people through the Vermont Center for Independent Living. You appropriate money to us, we give a big grant to VCIL, and they make money available for accessibility ramps, bathroom modifications, and other changes to their existing living situation so they can stay in their homes longer, which I think, and then another area of work that we do is around mobile home parks, and the residents of mobile home parks are disproportionately seniors, and your state funding through VHCB can help in those communities as well. The governor's proposed an increase for VHCB, and if that is approved, ultimately we would use some of those funds for both of those activities, as well as continuing to support using those state dollars to create new rental housing of the type that Kim and Jim have described. So I will just leave it there.
Great, thank you, and thanks for being here today. Appreciate it. All right. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add today? All right. Well, we need to be, I know we need to be on the floor here in a little bit. So, all right. Appreciate everybody coming today, and we'll be back next week. So hopefully we'll see you then. And I'm going to try to gather some of the names of some folks that were here so I can get you on our mailing list. So we'll update that this week. So thank you. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Kim. Brian.